One day after work, Armstrong tells Toshi, "I'm done. I put in for a transfer. I can't be on call anymore." He says, "I want to see my kids grow up," likely implying that the Zodiac case is taking a toll on his personal life. Meanwhile, Paul resides in a boathouse, grappling with alcoholism and drug addiction, consumed by depression over the Zodiac case. Robert is still obsessed with the Zodiac case and compiles a book of newspaper clippings. His wife tells him, "Nobody has more Zodiac crap than you." Even a day later, Robert arrives home late, carrying books about the ciphers, while his wife looks at him with a concerned gaze. After Armstrong's departure, Toshi is left alone and helpless. Haunted by the unresolved Zodiac case he once pursued relentlessly, unable to let it go. Robert introduces himself to Toshi as a friend of Paul Avery and a cartoonist at the San Francisco Chronicle. When Robert asks about the Zodiac case, Toshi replies, "I appreciate your interest, but we don't discuss open cases with the public." Undeterred, Robert presses, "What's the day-to-day progress on the case?" Toshi responds, "We're actively pursuing all leads." Robert asks, "And you're the only one on the case now, right?" Toshi sighs and says, "Mr. Graysmith, the Zodiac hasn't written in 3 years. In that time, we've had over 300 unrelated murder cases. That's a lot of grieving families who need our help. We can't prioritize only the Zodiac case." When Robert retorts, "So nobody cares?" Toshi replies firmly, "I still care." Robert pulls out several books and says, "Everything an amateur needs to create the ciphers the Zodiac sent is in these books. I thought if you could track these books, you might track the Zodiac. Since the Zodiac might be a military person, I visited every military base library and compiled a list of everyone who checked out these titles. But I found that these books were stolen." Toshi, intrigued, remarks, "So nearly every book on ciphers was stolen from the Presidio Library and Oakland Army Terminal Library. Someone didn't want a record of checking them out." Awestruck by Robert's dedication, Toshi asks, "Who did you say you are?" Robert replies, "I just want to help." Toshi shakes his head and says, "I can't let you help. I can't share information, and I certainly can't tell you to go see Mulanax in Vallejo." Robert persuades Mulanax from the Vallejo Police Department to share the Zodiac case files, claiming, "Toski sent me. The case isn't active anymore, and the Zodiac is long gone. He's yesterday's news, right? What's the harm in letting me see the files?" Mulanax relents, and Robert reviews all the Zodiac case files. Later, he meets with Toshi to discuss his findings. Robert informs Toshi that Darlene was being followed. He continues, "I know Mulanax said they identified a suspect, George Waters, but Darlene had many other admirers. She and her husband moved into their new house and threw a party. At the party, Darlene was terrified of someone who wasn't George Waters." Toshi asks Robert, "So you think this other person was Zodiac, and that Darlene knew him? If you believe Darlene knew Zodiac, you need to find evidence to establish their connection." Robert informs Toshi about phone calls made on the night of Darlene's murder. Toshi responds, "Yeah, Zodiac called the police." Robert clarifies, "Not just that, there were 4 other calls, 2 to Darlene's house, 1 to her brother-in-law, and 1 to her father-in-law. The caller was just breathing heavily." He adds that the calls began around 1:30 a.m., before the family knew Darlene had been shot. Surprised, Toshi asks, "Was this in the Vallejo files?" "I didn't know about this." Robert continues, "It's got to be more than a coincidence, right? Nobody randomly prank calls a victim's entire family 90 minutes after a shooting. Either Zodiac shot a random couple and then recognized Darlene, or she was targeted intentionally. Either way, Zodiac must have known her." Toshi nods, impressed, and says, "That's good." Toski mentions that Zodiac once called attorney Melvin Belly. Robert visits Belly's home, and while waiting, the maid informs him that she answered Zodiac's call because Belly was not home. He said he had to kill because it was his birthday, she recalls. She adds, "Mr. Belly was away for Christmas, gone for a week. The call came before the letter arrived." Robert asks, "So the call was before the December 20th letter, and Mr. Belly was gone for a week, returning on Christmas?" He deduces that Belly must have left on December 18th. This means Zodiac's birthday could be either on December 18th or 19th. Robert calls Toshi and reveals that when Zodiac phoned Melvin Belly's house, he told the maid it was his birthday. Toshi responds, "You need to confirm that Lee's birthday was December 18th. Robert's wife reads an article stating that Robert Graysmith has been quietly shopping his book about the Zodiac. She warns, "It details all your research on Zodiac. I'm not sure we want people knowing this. It could endanger our family, especially since Zodiac reads the San Francisco Chronicle." As expected, Robert receives an anonymous call with only heavy breathing. His wife, furious, confronts him for putting their family at risk. To investigate the man who terrified Darlene at the party, Robert seeks her sister, Linda, but even her parents don't know her whereabouts. After 51 weeks of silence, Zodiac sends a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle proclaiming, "I'm back with you." The letter mentions Toshi. However, popular author Armistead Maupin claims the letter is a forgery, suggesting Toshi wrote it to gain publicity. As a result, Toshi is removed from the homicide division. Robert visits Toshi, seeking help to find Linda. Despite Toshi's agitation, Robert argues passionately. Toshi urges him to stop, saying, "Too much time has passed, Robert. Too much evidence is lost. People get older. They forget. I've been a cop for 25 years, a murder detective for 12. You're a cartoonist. That's your job. Zodiac is mine, not yours." Robert involves even his children in creating a timeline of the Zodiac murders. After decoding a cipher sent by Zodiac, he is interviewed by a news channel. Excited, Robert tells his wife, "We found Linda. She's in jail. Isn't that great?" She responds, "Why did you go on TV? You've put our family in danger for him to see." Robert replies, "Oh, honey, you're being paranoid." She retorts, "Then who's been calling our house in the middle of the night? What's it going to take for you to be done with this? When will it be over?" Robert insists, "I need to know who he is. I need to stand there, I need to look him in the eye, and I need to know that it's him." When she asks, "Why do you need to do this?" he answers, "Because no one else will." Frustrated, Robert's wife takes their children to her mother's house. Robert meets Linda in jail and immediately asks about Zodiac. She replies, "Darlene always had lots of guys around, even though she was married. But this one guy was weird. He brought her gifts from Tijuana, and I don't know why she was friends with him. She once said he'd killed someone when he was in military." Linda continues, "At the party Darlene threw, people were just supposed to show up and drink beer. But this guy arrived in a suit, sat alone in a chair all night, and didn't talk to anyone. Darlene told me to stay away from him. She was scared of him. A couple of weeks later, she was dead." When Robert asks if she remembers his name, Linda initially hesitates. As Robert is leaving, she recalls, "It's Lee." Later, Robert sits alone in his home, surrounded by books and journals. His wife visits and asks, "How's the book coming along?" Robert reveals, "I've resigned from my cartoonist position at the San Francisco Chronicle." Concerned, she asks, "When was the last time you ate something?" Robert replies, "Nothing makes sense anymore." She softens, saying, "The kids miss you. I can't let them see you like this. Do whatever it takes to finish this." Then she tosses Lee's driver's license onto the floor. Robert rushes to Toshi's home and shouts from outside, "The birthday was the one time he was weak, the one time he gave something away." When Toshi warns, "I'm calling the police for the disturbance you're causing," Robert yells, "It's Arthur Lee Allen." Toshi, surprised, asks, "Where did you get that name?" He had never mentioned Lee to Robert. Robert explains, "The Zodiac called Melvin Belly's house in December 1969, saying, 'I need to kill. Today's my birthday.' Lee's birthday is the same day, December 18th. Showing Toshi the Vallejo files, Robert says, "And he knew Darlene. Mulanak said Lee was your favorite suspect. You spent 2 years on him, and no one else came close." Toshi sighs, "But all the evidence said no." Sherwood disqualified his handwriting. If this case went to trial, the defense would only need to call Sherwood to the stand, and he'd rule out Lee based on the handwriting. There was no way to bring Lee to court. There was no solid evidence. Robert insists, "We have evidence. He was seen with the ciphers, the military boot prints, the same size shoes and gloves, the reference to the most dangerous game, the Zodiac watch. his background with school children, the bloody knives. Toshi interrupts, but that's all circumstantial. Toshi adds, the cab driver's shirt, his wallet, his keys. We should have found at least one of those in Lee's trailer. Robert presents his argument by referencing the Zodiac Killer's timeline and Arthur Lee Allen's activities. The Zodiac committed his first confirmed murder in Vallejo on Christmas 1968. 8 months earlier, Lee was fired for molesting students, and his family discovered he was a pedophile. The Zodiac letters began in 1969, following the murder of Darlene Ferrin, and continued until authorities investigated Lee at his workplace. After this investigation, none of the subsequent Zodiac letters included pieces of the cab driver's shirt, possibly because Lee disposed of them out of fear, suspecting he was under scrutiny. The Zodiac remained silent for 3 years until January 1974, when a new letter emerged. By this time, Lee was no longer considered a primary suspect, which may have emboldened the Zodiac to resume communication. 3 new letters were sent in January, May, and July of 1974. However, the letters ceased again after Lee's arrest in January 1975. No Zodiac letters were received during Lee's imprisonment. Following his release in August 1977, a new Zodiac letter surfaced, the first in 4 years. Toski asked Robert, "Okay, Zodiac had to have known Darlene Ferrin, right?" Robert replied, "Yes, because of the phone calls on the night of her murder. According to the Vallejo file, Darlene knew a man named Lee. So putting coincidence aside, Robert, how can you be sure that Lee Allen is the same Lee from this file? Vallejo is a small town, but it's not that small. How do you connect the two?" Robert explained, Darlene Ferrin worked at the House of Pancakes on the corner of Tennessee and Carroll. Arthur Lee Allen lived in his mother's basement on Fresno Street. Door to door, that's less than 50 yards. Toshi, surprised, said, "Is that true?" "I've walked it myself," Robert confirmed. Toshi was impressed but added, "We still need the prints, the handwriting." Robert responded, "I'm not asking you as a cop." Toshi countered, "But I am a cop. I can't prove this." Robert replied, "Just because you can't prove it doesn't mean it's not true." Toshi told Robert, "Finish the book." December 20th, 1983, Vallejo. Robert goes to a convenience store. I need to stand there, I need to look him in the eye, and I need to know that it's him. On August 16, 1991, Michael Mageau, a survivor of the 1969 Vallejo attack, arrived at Ontario Airport. An investigator showed him several photographs, and Mageau identified Arthur Lee Allen as the Zodiac Killer.